There's a saying out there, don't judge a book by its cover. Well, I certainly did not heed that when I first saw the cover illustration for this one. But in my defense, at first glance it really looked kind of, cliche? I mean, look at it! It's a black-haired gentleman with a red head, most probably his love interest. With that and the high school uniforms and swords that you can only see in anime, even you will have an understanding of my first impression for this one. Exactly because of that reason, I moved the series to the middle of my playlist, in which it stayed until one day I got bored and decided to reshuffle the list up a bit, in which it piqued my interest once more, and oh boy, I wished I watched it sooner. Well, without further ado, I welcome you all to the first episode of the anime portfolio. Written by Riku Misora, this light novel series was animated in late 2015 by Silverlink and Nexus. The story follows the journey of Ikki Kurogane, an aspiring mage knight, or as they call it in their universe, a blazer. You know, those things, I guess. Blazers are people who have supernatural abilities as usual that can manifest weapons called devices. Well, that's a simple name for that, which are basically made up of their souls, so you clash those things that is your lifeblood. Well, I can live with that. There's only one problem with Ikki though.
使える異能は最低限の身体能力強化だけだし、魔力の量なんて
能力値も軒並み最低レベルで、ついたあだ名はワースト1。
F ランクのくせに優勝とかありえねえ。一回まぐれで A ランクに勝っただけでよ。あれって八百長って噂だぜ。マジで。
His magic levels are lower than even the lowest that qualifies for an F rank. That and a plethora of other inconveniences won't stop him from trying though. At first, the base plot sounds like those of the same genre, where one individual is so underrated that everyone gets surprised when he or she wins, and yes, it's kinda like that really. But what made Chivalry stand out from let's say, the irregular at Magic High School is that unlike Tatsuya, who's just overpowered at an aspect that the system has not acknowledged, Ikki is inherently underpowered, making his exploits and tactics seem more like a life or death battle of survival. To compensate for his lack of magical power, he trained on every single form of swordplay and combat techniques that he could see and mastered every single one of them, to the point where he can pretty much master a technique that he saw the first time in a matter of seconds, a skill which became the foundation of his main ability, the blade steel. Now you may ask, what's the point of this skill if your opponent can spot fire out of her sword? And yeah, at first it sounds kinda sucky when you think about it, but remember, sometimes you can defeat a gunner with a machete if you're fast enough. And for Ikki's case, he can be fast enough to do so anyway. He does have an ace in the hole if the situation calls for it, and it's called Ito Shura, his noble art. It's a body modification type ability that lets him use his latent magic that sleeps within his body by ignoring his instinct to survive, doubling his overall physical stats and infusing the blade with magic. Well, the funny thing is, even this type of technique is still locked down by the system, for body modification seems to be an automatic thing for other blazers. But the lack of magic is the least of Ikki's worries. He also has to deal with unfairness and underhanded tactics that his detractors would use in order to dissuade him from accomplishing his goal. From going pussy invisible mode, to setting up traps before the fight, or even robbing him of his ace. But Ikki has and will find a way around it, which is fun to watch actually. Also, it's not always underhanded. Some do really overpower him even on base stats, in which he indulges in their bouts with an almost insane grin. Even though I have seen the same basic plot for this kind of anime from time to time, what really made Chivalry stand out above the rest for me is, at least, is that the story is not afraid to throw its main character into situations with improbable chances of winning, all while maintaining his below F rank power. For real though, Ikki's skill set does not change drastically every fight until the very end, which means he managed to win all of that with his base stats until the story needed him to power up. It can look almost unbelievable at some points in which I say, yeah, it's anime. And yeah, I do admit that some bits and pieces are kinda eyebrow raising really. But the fact that Ikki defeats his enemies with wits and pure sword techniques is oddly satisfying for some reason. Yeah. Okay, you're not convinced? Then let's take a look at what cemented my love for this series, the Ikki vs Tohka fight.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for!
This one is one of the most intense fight scenes I have ever had the pleasure of watching. And this is just basically a one-move Mexican standoff but with swords. For us to talk about this in detail though, we have to look at two things that makes this scene very powerful. The episode before this and the first scenes before the fight really showed Ikki at his lowest, seeing a leverage that can be used against him. His father, Itsuki Kurogane, used his spawn, Akaza Mamoru, and his power as both the lead patriarch of the Kurogane family and his position at the League of Mage Knights to inflict as much punishment as he could to his son. For a number of days, he was forced to fight in consecutive matches with barely minimum amounts of rest, even drugging his food to weaken him. And yet, with all of these, he still fought hard and won every single fight. In a seemingly last-ditch effort to dissuade his son from moving on, he dropped the bomb that left Ikki almost soulless.
だとすればそれは大きな間違いだ。私はお前をちゃんと認めている。いや、無益で済むのだ。最悪なのは半端な力で半端に結果を出すことだ。今のお前のように。
At that moment, Ikki was on his lowest point. So low in fact, that it's possible that he walked his way to the final venue unconscious. But as he walked in the middle of that snowstorm of his life, even as his subconscious self tried to discourage him from continuing, even as his initial motivation seemed too far away from him, he continued. Because he felt the fire that guided him out of that snowstorm and into the light. This is where Stella comes in. Stella Vermillion is the complete opposite, yet is also similar to Ikki. She's the third princess of a small European country named Vermillion, and was called a genius for a long time due to how she handled her powerful yet seemingly uncontrollable power of fire. The power was too great for her frail young body to handle, yet with determination she succeeded, earning her that distinction in which she hated. The main reason that she transferred to Japan's Hagon Academy is to get away from her country and just experience things in a fresh new atmosphere, and she'll definitely gonna get it with Ikki. Yes. I really love Stella's characterization here. She might be your typical run-in-the-mill red-headed tsundere, but what really elevated her status above the other tsunderes is that she gets to the point. Now that might have sounded a bit contradictory to you. After all, tsunderes are generally known to be bad at telling their true feelings. But hear me out. Stella gets the man, and she is ready to fight for it. Of course she still has problems when speaking out her feelings towards him, but they do work it out in the end. She is worried about how her feelings with him would affect her standing as a princess, yet she is willing to cast that aside in order to motivate him to fight. And she really shone the brightest on episode 4, when Ikki is hopelessly cornered by the vilest, a literal piece of shit, and overall spineless fuckboy Kirihaya Shizuya. It might not have been a straight confession, but it's still sweet as heck. Most of all though, as I said before, she became his light, and his new motivation to claw his way to the top. She really is the opposite of Ikki, and that is why they're perfect together. Now this is the part where some people have a problem with, the fact that Tohka did not dodge this evidently kamikaze attack. But that's where we see the ones who most probably did not watch the scene attentively, because she stated it right there. Like seriously mates, how much more exposition do you need to understand that she chose to clash with Ikki? She, of all people, saw the warrior within the boy, much so that she could not help but to admire the chivalry of this one weakened and wounded knight, and she showed her respect to him by giving her all on her signature attack, as said by her mentor. It's not about who wins or loses anymore. They did not care if the game was rigged. It's judgment time, by souls clashing towards one another, a battle of will and determination. And there, Ikki has proved himself, as he triumphantly raised his blooded fist in front of all. The weakest has beaten the strongest, and no amount of bullshit can anyone do to try to detract that anymore. As the principal of Hagon Academy said, at that moment, he slashed all the doubts with his sword, jump-starting the rise of the another one. To end this video, I can only say, please watch this series. It might look kinda cliche, but the story really is an inspiring one. I was so hooked into it that I was forced to read its source light novel. A first for me, and trust me, the story is a bit better told in there than on the anime. It also made me wonder as to how in the name of the 7 nations of Teyvat did this one not get a second season while it's inferior. Yes, I'm talking about that damned asterisk war. Did. Like, seriously mates, the next part of Chivalry will wipe the floor on whatever asterisk season 2 was about. I bet my freaking 2 brain cells on it, mates. So, that's it for now, I guess. This video took me months before I could finish because of several things, I guess. It's mostly because I either procrastinated or is unsatisfied. Maybe both. Don't forget to like, sub, and if you have something to say, the comments section is always open, mates. Well, it's time for me to hit some of that exhaust fumes. Lol.